a animação dos personagens, que foi o que faltou na apresentação.
It takes a lot of aesthetic skills as far as knowing human movement, but it also takes a lot of technical know-how and a good foundation to be able to pull off what we want.
Eu não sei como fazer isso da Play, porque para mim aqui eu tenho todas as qualidades
to craft animations that actually become truly interactive with the player. So it gives a really good amount of insight, and it's fairly interesting. So let me introduce the panelists. We have Ivo
Vocês conseguem alterar a qualidade da transmissão aí também?
Jason Cole, lead cinematic animator from the German office, and Steve Bender is our global animator. I'll let them take it away.
Hello. Hey guys, how you doing tonight? All right. All right, so
Falou, Teixeira. Grande abraço. Aproveita bem aí o show.
I'm the lead cinematic animator for Squadron 42, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about Look IK, or PCAP Look Transformation. The official technical term is PCAP Look Transformation, but today I'm just going to call it Look IK so I don't get confused or anything like that, because that's what we call it around the office. So what is Look IK? So Look IK is a system that we use to either have an AI or an NPC look at the player or a specific
perguntando que achei da apresentação. Achei incrível, cara. Tá louco. Não foi nada da 3.0. Falou isso não. Até mais. Não foi a 3.0 que a gente queria ver, mas foi um conteúdo muito bom, cara. Foi muito bom.
So I'm going to show you Moro. Moro is still being worked on, and this is just a test level that I use to test out animations within the system.
Funcionando foi algo assim que me deixou.
So here we go.
Cito's great, but a bit of a gossip. Don't tell him anything you don't want the whole crew to know. Rumour has it that's why his ex left, but he's probably better off. Told me she had a gambling problem.
All right. So this is just standard PCAP that we usually get, facial and audio, and there's not running any Look IK system right now. So what I did is I set up a camera to move around a bit, just to represent some player movement, and what I'm going to do is tell
Eu diria que esse mês já não tem mais, né? Porque já é a última live no final do mês. Vamos ver se em novembro a gente consegue fazer alguma coisa.
So this is our standard Look IK system that we had before. It just shows the Look IK always on. Let me show that.
Cito's great, but a bit of a gossip. Don't tell him anything you don't want the whole crew to know. Rumour has it that's why his ex left.
Olha o sistema do cara olhando,
meu. Probably better off. Told me she had a gambling problem.
All right, so now you can see that he is
Vocês viram a diferença na animação ali?
Which is really good. I mean, we're getting some of the performance shining through on the face and on the head a little bit, but we are losing a lot of the subtleties, and this is one of the issues we wanted to sort out.
Sim, essa mesmo, Gisele, é os podcasts.
Okay, so I'm going to show you how we did that.
Eu tô sem tempo para produzir esse tipo de conteúdo. Se eu não conseguir produzir agora em novembro, só ano que vem, porque dezembro provavelmente não vou conseguir fazer também.
And then what we did is we gave each one of those body parts a value from a 0 to 100. 0 being completely off and 100 being completely on for the Look IK. And the first thing we did is we hand keyed those values throughout the animation, which gave us pretty good results with the Look IK, but it's still, we weren't getting, enough of the subtleties within the acting, and it was extremely time consuming. So the next thing we did is we created a control within Maya that we place wherever the character is acting towards. And then we would say, whenever this character or whenever this actor is looking at this control node, we would turn the Look IK 100% on, and then the further it looked away, the lower we would scale that down to 0, basically. So you can see here in this first picture, this is the control that we would use. And in this picture, he's looking directly at it, so 100% Look IK, and then the further he would look away from it, the less Look IK we would have. And this gave us much better results. A lot more of the acting was shining through and things like that. But it was still a longer process. So one of the other animators that was working on this with me, Owen Robertson, he approached me and asked if he can make a tool for us. He'd been working on his coding skills and
eu vou ver essa parte que eu não consegui ver no início e depois eu também vou olhar.
Yeah, sure, go for it. As long as it doesn't affect his current workload or his current workload. And as long as he submitted his code through TechArt and got code review, then it was totally fine because we just didn't want to break anything within the pipeline already. And he made this Look IK toolkit, which is great. I'm not going to go into too much depth about this, but this basically took that process that we were having to do manually and really just automated it. It made things much faster. The nice thing that he added that was an extra feature is that he was able to take
da ferramenta que
look IK curves for the eyes and the head, and then put them on two separate layers within Maya, and then we were able to either completely dampen those or exaggerate the look IK on those systems within Maya. Then we bake it down, and then do a little bit of animation polish on it. So now I'm going to show you the results that we were getting after this system.
É verdade, o Roberto tinha uma fábrica de hype. Não mostrou a 3.0, mas mostrou o que a gente vai ter depois dela, né?
Let me just make sure I give you guys some sound here.
Sito's great, but a bit of a gossip. Don't tell him anything you don't want the whole crew to know. Rumour has it that's why his ex left. But he's probably better off. Told me she had a gambling problem.
So now you can see we're getting a lot more of the subtleties within the acting. You can see him looking back at Sito, looking left and right before he actually talks to you.
Rodolfo perguntando, vai comprar para Pioneer?
It's a bit hard to see from the distance for this camera, so I'm going to show you guys a compare and contrast and zoom in a little bit on the head. All right, so the left is Look IK, the original system, always on. And then the right is Look IK with a little bit of polish and the animation toolkit, or the Look IK toolkit.
Wow.
And I'll let this run a few times, but you can really see the differences pulling through now. So you can see he's looking right to the left, and he's constantly looking back towards Sito. And we're getting a lot of smaller things in here, like head nods and little head turns.
Essa ferramenta de animação deles está muito legal.
You can see it there as well. So I'll show this one more time, and then the next thing I'm going to show you guys is edge cases, basically how flexible the system is while it's running real time. Yeah. All right, so upper left, upper right, bottom left, bottom right. This is the exact same animation. But you can see I'm basically pushing the Look IK system as much as I can without breaking it or deactivating it. And you can see it kind of slipping here in the eyes a bit. And also when he walks away at the end of this on the bottom left, you can see the head pulling a little much. And so those would be the next things that we would start to figure out in the system to really tighten it up. But I mean, overall, I mean, it's been pretty good progress for the last 8 months, and we're pretty happy with it. So that's it for Look IK, and you know, thank you for coming, and thank you for your support. Get my water out.
So hi, I'm Ivo Herzog, and this part of the talk is all about teaching a character how to walk on stairs and over uneven terrain and over terrain that's filled with obstacles. And first I would like to show you a video with all the problems we try to solve. So this is the space station Damien, and it's rendered with the physical proxies on top. So that's a debug mode. Everything in gray is a physical surface. And one thing is very obvious here. Every surface you can walk on is a perfectly flat plane. Even the stairs are perfectly flat. So on top of the render geometry, we have only a simple slope plane.
Isso aí é uma reclamação que a galera tem feito bastante, né? Que a animação das escadas está uma droga.
If you use them on a stair or on a slope, then you get this floating and sliding up and down all the time. And it doesn't look too cool. And this is another issue. When a character is standing on a stair, it's even more obvious. You can see one leg is clipping through the geometry or into the ground, while the other is floating in the air. And here's another issue I see all the time. When the character gets close to an edge, then one of his legs starts to hover above the ground. And that's because we use the center of the character to find the distance to the ground. And the concept that both legs can be on different surfaces, so that's not implemented yet. So all these things are not looking nice, but they are not a dramatic problem. They are more like, how to say, a render issue. They have no impact on the gameplay. But the next one, I think, that's a real problem. And there's a good reason why we don't have physicalized stairs in the game yet. In the past, every part of the character was physicalized, even his legs. And if he has only his flat ground animations and nothing else, then he can't make a step over obstacles. That means every box that's in front of his feet and higher than 20 centimeters is a locomotion blocker. And this gets even worse in first person. So when you are strafing or moving backwards and aiming, you can't always look at the ground. So this is like a glass wall to you. It's not immediately obvious what's blocking your movements. And of course, it's also a problem for level design. You cannot tell a level designer that everything needs to be flat under your feet. I mean, that can't be the solution. So this video was showing only a few issues we have with stairs.
O cara falou que antes até as pernas eram objetos, né? Eram objetos físicos. Então, se tu tivesse qualquer coisa com uma altura maior que 20 centímetros, já não conseguia passar, mesmo se fosse um degrau. Por isso que as escadas não tinham degraus, entendeu?
There are way too many unpredictable situations.
Isso aí é apenas alguns dos problemas que eles tiveram para a movimentação do personagem.
Try to find a procedural solution. And the first issue, the one with the slopes, is not that hard to get right, and we already have a system for that in the Lumberyard SDK. It's called ground alignment. And when I put a character on a slope and enable ground alignment, then the motions look like this. And you can see the difference immediately. Both legs are now aligned with the ground. So this system takes a flat ground animation and transforms it on the fly into an uneven ground animation. And it's taking only the slope angle of the ground as a reference. And the implementation for this is pretty simple. Every frame we cast a ray under each foot, and then we check if the intersection point with the ground is higher or lower than the current animation position. And then we move the hips slightly up or down and adjust the legs with IK. So with this system, we can put a character on a slope, and he can stand or walk or run in any direction, and the feet always have solid contact with the ground. And once you have the first version of this running, then you need to test every single asset in your database. Really, every asset can be a new problem, and then you need to find some heuristics to make them look right. And here's one example. As long as the character is only standing or walking upright, we only need to lower the hips a bit and adjust the legs with IK so that the legs can reach the ground. But if we have a crouch pose, like in this case, then we need to do the opposite. Then we move the hips up and stretch the legs down. And another important thing that you need to get right are the joint angles. When you are using IK, it's very easy to mess up the joints for the knees. So for example, if your IK target is very far away, you can get something that we call hyperextension. It means the upper leg and the lower leg snaps into an almost straight line, and that completely breaks the animation flow. And yeah, sometimes the legs can just bend in the opposite direction, and that looks painful, I guess. And another joint that created a lot of headache is the ankle joint, and that's the joint that rotates the foot. And it can't rotate more than 30 degrees in certain directions. So when a character is standing on a slope, it's not always possible to align the entire foot plane with the ground. You just can't do it without breaking the joint limits. And then he needs to stand with one leg or with both legs on his toes. And this happens here a lot when he's walking or strafing in different directions. So when you're moving backwards and downhill, the only practical way to do that is to walk on the ball points of the toes. And this is not coming from the original animation data. This is all part of the IK system. So ground alignment is for quite a while in the Lumberyard SDK or the CryEngine SDK. I think I've written the first version in 2006. The only problem is it only works with slopes.
Mas ainda está estranho, né? Tá bem melhor, mas ainda está estranho.
With random obstacles. But that's exactly the feature we need. On space stations, we would like to have stairs with horizontal threads. On the planets, there will be lots of natural ground debris, like small stones, big rocks, trunks, and whatever level designers like to put in the environment.
Pelo follow, cara. Seja
So the
bem-vindo.
real challenge is to figure out how a character can deal with every obstacle we place in the environment. And this is a simple test level I made with a lot of stuff in it.
Olha só que legal,
And when
hein?
a character walks through this environment, and there's an obstacle in front of it, then you can see that sometimes he puts his feet directly on that object, and then he lifts his entire body over it. And sometimes he just steps over it. Now, to get something like this to work,
Que legal.
the character needs a pretty good understanding of the environment around him. And he also needs to look into the future to react to whatever is in front of him.
Uau, que
And when we
demais
see
ficou,
people
meu.
walking in real life, especially when they walk over uneven terrain, they always look at the ground in front of them to find a safe position for the next footstep.
Ah, bem-vindo, Nóbrega.
Our in-game character somehow needs to do something similar. He needs to analyze his environment somehow to figure out what's around him. Now, because we know the speed of the character and his movement direction, we know exactly where the next footstep will land. If the next footstep ends up inside of an object or a couple of centimeters above the ground, then we use a K to modify the trajectory of the legs. And of course, this modification needs to happen ahead of
Ah,
time,
que massa de caminho nos buracos ali.
so that we have enough time to place the feet properly on the next surface.
Bah, ficou
So
muito
then
legal, cara.
finally, we have here an example on a staircase. And once you have all this working with the random obstacles, it's not such a big deal to make it work on a stair with horizontal threads. There's just one detail here that's not always right, and it's maybe hard to see. So when people walk up and down stairs, they always try to hit the horizontal part of a step with the entire foot. But that's not always the case here. You can see that sometimes he touches only the edge of a thread with one of his feet. And yeah, this looks, how to say, it's not a big issue, it just looks like a misstep. If this happens to real people, then you expect them to stumble, lose balance, and maybe fall over. But in this case, how to say, nothing happens. And the reason why we have this problem is, so in this implementation, I'm doing only vertical leg adjustments. And then it depends only on the leg position on the original animation. That's why the result is a bit random.
Ficou legal,
What we
cara.
get here,
Meio
it works
estranho,
most of the time,
mas
but
bem
it's
melhor
not very
que
consistent.
antes.
So in one of the next iteration, I need to consider horizontal adjustments as well. And then we have an example with a character running over obstacles, and you can see that he's actually trying to do a procedural jump over obstacles. So when we have running or sprinting, then we need to scan the environment
cara.
1 or 2 meters ahead to make sure we can react to whatever is in front of the character. So if we find an obstacle, we just compute a new trajectory, one that looks like the arc of a jump. And this works with any speed and any movement direction. And the process we are using here is actually pretty similar to what a real body does when people move in real life, at least from a visual point of view.
Bah, ficou bom. Isso ficou bom.
This system is a bit like an AI system, but an AI system only for the legs.
Isso, o cara está comentando que isso é praticamente um sistema de inteligência artificial só para as pernas. Ficou bom, ficou foda. Gostei.
Okay, thank you. So I mentioned before that this is like an AI system. And now I want to go more into the details how we are doing this analyzing of the environment, because the character needs to understand what's around him.
Que animal, hein?
So for us humans, it's pretty obvious. We
Galera
use our eyes to
reclamando,
look
das caras
around,
tava
and when we
estranho,
walk,
agora não
we
vai
look
ter
at
que
the ground
reclamar
in
mais.
front of us. And we do that more than we think. It's an unconscious process. And now maybe you expect that we implemented something like neural networks or computer vision or something even more crazy. But that's not the case. These things need to run fast, so it has to be very simple. And I think this picture explains pretty well what we are actually doing. You need to imagine the in-game character like a blind man. A blind man who is constantly touching the environment with his walking stick to figure out what's around him. If you can't use your eyes, then using your sense of touch is just another way to perceive the environment. It's maybe not as efficient as using the eyes, but it's a lot easier to implement. And our implementation is only a small variation of this analogy.
Agora vamos mostrar como é que eles implementaram essa mecânica nova.
Yeah, so the only difference is, instead of the walking stick, we use simple rays to test the environment, or to scan the environment, or to touch the environment. But to get the information you need to shoot a lot of rays into the ground. And you can start with 50 rays, that's already enough, but if you want to have an absolutely clear picture of the environment, you need a lot more rays. And we have a function for that, it's called ray world intersection. We used it in the past for ground alignment. Ground alignment needs only 2 rays. It's a very simple system because it has no prediction. And when we tested this in a scene with 30 eye characters, the frame rate dropped immediately from 50 to 5 and everything stopped working and we spent almost all the time for this.
E aí, Dargor, beleza, cara? Como é que tá?
And the reason why things run so slow is the binary trees we have to organize the entire world are meanwhile so deep and so complex that we waste too much time just parsing these trees. So ray world intersection was just not fast enough. And if you need something that is 20 times faster or 30 times faster, you can't just look at the existing code and hope you can make it somehow multiple times faster. Maybe you're lucky, usually that doesn't work. Sometimes it's better to rethink the whole problem and then start from scratch with a completely new approach. And that's what we did. And the problem we have here is quite unique. We need a lot of rays, but all these rays are close together. They're actually all in a very small area around the player. Now, instead of sending the same 50 rays to the same binary trees over and over, we pass the binary trees only once. And then we collect all the physical proxies that are in this small area around the player. And it's a bit better I show you with a video how this works. So under the character, you can see this gray quadratic field. That's the local area I'm talking about. And this is basically a physical microcosmos in the local space of the character. So this is all a debug mode here, and you can see that every render geometry has a simple approximation.
Ele usa um tipo de scanner para saber quais objetos estão próximos a ele, para ele conseguir, para a inteligência artificial das pernas saber o que tem no fim da próxima passada dele. Então, por exemplo, assim, se ele está andando para frente e 1 metro para frente tem, por exemplo, um tijolo, ele sabe que o pé dele tem que vir mais, tem que pisar em cima daquele tijolo, entendeu?
You have all these physical proxies in the local space of the character, then we can do an even more aggressive culling on the animation side to find all the possible candidates for an intersection with the legs. And one thing is very important here, that's the size of this local area. The bigger it is, the more physical proxies are inside, and then things get slower.
Wow,
so
os caras são muito
it actually grows exponentially. But this here is not the real size. I just made it 3 times bigger to show you how the things are working under the hood. So the real size is this, and you can see it's dynamic. It's super small when the character is standing idle, and it gets bigger when he starts to walk or run. It grows in the movement direction. And the reason why it grows is this local area is a bounding volume. We have a bounding volume around the rays.
Para eles resolverem o problema da queda de frame por causa da grande quantidade de... Seja bem-vindo, JPG. Valeu pelo follow, cara. Eles usavam um radar que tinha uma área fixa, né? Que eles usavam para escanear o que tinha na volta, para eles saberem qual objeto o cara ia pisar para fazer a animação. Mas isso aí queimava uma grande quantidade de processamento da máquina. O que eles resolveram fazer? Eles criaram um scanner dinâmico. Que quando o cara ele for, por exemplo, em uma direção X, ela vai crescer dinamicamente naquela direção para calcular qual é o próximo objeto que tem para o pé do cara poder pisar. Cara, é muito inteligente a mecânica deles.
But I would say a speed up between 20 times faster and 50 times faster is a good number. And once the performance problem with the raycasting was solved, it was time to test this system on a planet or on one of the moons. And the terrain of a planet, that's basically a lot of high field patches projected on a sphere, on a giant sphere. And the high field, that's always a connection of planes with a different slope angle. That's why I didn't expect any issues.
Pô, demais, né, Rodolfo?
Slopes are easy. What can go wrong with slopes? But the first test looked more like this.
Aí sabe que vai ter, a galera na comunidade vai ficar dizendo assim, ah, mas essa mecânica lá é inútil. Lança de uma vez a 3.0 pra gente.
Really deep into the ground. Okay, what's going on here? To render the terrain, we use a feature we call GPU tessellation or hardware tessellation. And that's a graphics card feature. So it takes existing geometry and subdivides it multiple times based on the vertex normals. And that's how we get these nice and smooth curved surfaces on the terrain. But physics is not aware of that. The physics proxies are still using the resolution of the untessellated terrain. And the physics system was never designed to deal with tessellation. That's why collision detection goes wrong and things end up like this here. A
comunidade está ansiosa demais pelo game. Os caras vão dizer assim, ah, isso aí não precisa. Isso aí, não, eles vão dizer assim, o cara é muito preciosismo do Chris, bola pra frente.
Such an issue, you have two options. You turn off tessellation and problem fixed, or you do the same for the physics proxies, you tessellate them as well. So, two options. I guess you know what we did.
Por isso que eu espero estar
We tessellated the terrain. And this needs to happen at runtime, every frame. And that wasn't an easy decision. It made the physics guys a bit nervous, because this GPU tessellation is just brute force processing power. A graphics card is designed to do that, but a CPU is not. But the good news is you don't need to tessellate everything around you, the entire terrain. You only need to focus on this little small local area I showed you before. It's much smaller than this one. I just made it bigger to show you
vocês viram que para resolver o problema dele caminhar no
square meters around the player. So it's not that much.
Deles caminhar no planeta, eles criaram aquele mesmo scanner ali para rastrear o que tem de físico na volta dele. Mas isso queima um processamento violento da CPU. Olha ali, cara, o chão.
Okay, it's very easy to work with high field patches because they are ordered meshes, and every access is a direct access into a 2D array.
Meu Deus,
so I can pick all the polygons I need for tessellation and ray scanning directly. And because the tessellation formula is very simple, this system runs even faster on tessellated terrain than all my simple test levels you've seen before. And that's a bit unexpected. So after all this extra work with tessellation, we can finally put our first step on a new moon without sinking into the ground. And the surface of a terrain, of a moon or a planet, that's always a mix
que legal, ali a posição do cara no planeta,
between high fields and artist-generated content. So the rocks you see here, the outposts on stage in the distance.
Que animal.
Okay. The vegetation that you see every once in a while, that's all artist-generated. And you can walk on almost all those surfaces.
Pegada persistente losada eu acho difícil, cara. Mas eu acho que vai acontecer o que acontece na vida real, né? Tipo, se tiver atmosfera no planeta e o cara pisar, com o tempo vai sumir, né? Porque não tem como os caras fazerem isso aí persistente, imagina. Quanto de processamento os caras vão ter que gastar?
And the word procedural means that we have a piece of code, and this piece of code either generates a new motion from scratch. Or, like in this case, it takes an existing motion and modifies it in the way how we need it. So in other words, a programmer needs to figure out how people move in a specific situation, and then he writes a couple of code lines to reproduce the visual pattern of that motion. And all these procedural methods have in common that a computer follows the steps and algorithms.
Tô sentindo, Demolidor, que a minha placa de vídeo vai ter que, né?
Same problem. They work only for specific situations or specific motions. That means, in practice, so whenever you need a new behavior,
não só as pegadas ficam marcadas, Rosada, mas tu viu o sistema de partícula?
Or maybe the animation director just wants to see something totally different.
Tá muito
then
legal,
a programmer needs to sit down and write new code. That's how it works. And this new code is always a combination of different IK solutions. And because it's a kinematic method, it can't be physically correct. And when you work with IK, then you can do things that are completely crazy. So maybe you remember the example with the boxes at the beginning. So this works pretty well as long as the boxes are not higher than 0.5 meter. But we can do more than that. We could go to 1 meter, but then you get poses that look like Jean-Claude Van Damme. or I mean, IK, that's something that comes from the robot industry. So that's the origin. And if you use that to manipulate human motions, then there's a risk that things start to look robotic or you completely break the underlying.
Uma coisa que eu sempre quis, eu não sei se isso vai acontecer, é as partículas grudarem na roupa e nos veículos do mesmo jeito que grudam nas construções. Daí eu vou dizer assim, ó, balls of steel. Não sei se isso vai acontecer, tá? Duvido muito, porque acho que isso sim seria muita coisa para ser feita, mas ia ficar animal, hein?
And because Star Citizen is still a first-person game, one that is using a unified rig, the system is also active in first person. So whenever you look down at your legs or you see your shadow on the ground, that you can actually see how he is stepping up and down stairs and stepping over things. And all these things here, that's an early stage. It's an experimental system.
Isso aí é todo um sistema experimental que eles estão testando para ver como é que vai funcionar no futuro.
So I guess it will keep us busy for a while. And that is, the end of my part, the end of my presentation. Thanks for coming.
Tá animal, hein? Gostei pra caramba disso aí.
So I just wanted to say, what was that? I just wanted to say a few words here about what you guys have seen today. What Jason and Ivo have shown is just a small example of the technical challenges that we're dealing with on the animation side here. In a typical game, you'll be used to the areas that you're playing in built by level designers, built by level artists, and people like that.
Mas já, Rodolfo, onde é que tu viu essa informação?
Section of that game has gone through a rigorous testing. The animators have been able to run through it. The QA guys have been able to run through it. Everybody knows exactly what is going to happen. But in Star Citizen, it's really not that simple. I mean, as Ivo is showing here, I've never seen this planet before. And you have situations where it's possible, and what you'll see throughout the day today, where you could
que legal, vocês viram ali que a pegada levanta a areia na volta do pé?
That potentially nobody else has been on before, or I've never been to. No QA guy has seen it. Up at some corner of this world, and you get into a gunfight for your life. And in those situations, the animation system needs to hold up. As I've been talking with you guys over the past couple days and the past couple months, people have told me about
que armaduras e as armas, eu sei que elas iam ter desgaste, mas eu não sabia que ia ter sujeira.
And guys are talking about mining and landing on planets and exploring and stuff like that.
Isso foi uma coisa que o Harrison Lee falou. Parece que as pernas estão um pouco desligadas do resto do corpo. Teve algumas vezes que eu notei isso aí também, Harrison. Parece que tipo o corpo está flutuando e as pernas só estão acompanhando, né? Mas com certeza isso é uma coisa que eles vão melhorar para frente, eu acho. Se eles melhorarem o sistema da escada, eles vão melhorar isso aí, né?
For our community and for Star Citizen. Ivo made a great statement. He said, taking the first steps on a new moon. That's a huge deal for us. We are not making animation for a game. We're making animation for a universe. So thank you guys for your support, and thank you for coming.
Olha, que apresentação, hein?
That was good. Thanks, guys. That was really cool. We don't have time with this panel for a Q&A session. Other panels we may. However, the good news is it's the start of the con this year. These guys are going to be here on the show floor. If you guys have questions for them, corner them. Ivo can talk forever about the low-level tech he does. Everybody knows that Steve can talk a good amount, and Jason is pretty smart as well.
Na verdade, a apresentação já acabou, né? A gente tá olhando a parte que eu não consegui olhar no início.
Thank you so much. The next panel, we're going to reset for just a minute. The next panel is going to be
Losado comentando, é ruim só ter que esperar até 2030 pro jogo ficar pronto. Isso é verdade, Losada, mas eu penso por outro lado. A gente não vai ter que esperar até 2030 para ele ficar pronto, né? Pra gente jogar, na verdade, né? Nós vamos ter que esperar até 2030 para pegar ele totalmente pronto. Nós vamos ter que esperar pouco menos que isso pra gente conseguir já jogar. A hora que sair a 3.0, a 3.1 e a 3.2, já vai ser uma boa parte do game, né?